Cop hears children's voices inside empty daycare. You won't believe what he finds there. There are people who don't deserve forgiveness. They are such evil and petty beings that the only right place for them is a prison cell. Fortunately, there are also types of people whose only purpose in life is to make evil never triumph. Heroes who work daily to make this world a fairer place. Harry Evans had spent half his life working for the Colorado State Police Department. Throughout his extensive and award-winning career as a police inspector, he had had to deal with all kinds of cases, from the theft of a purse to having to chase down and find some of the most dangerous murderers in the history of the US. The city of Denver, where he was born and from where he had never left, except on one occasion when he had to travel to Florida to attend to a family emergency, was his home, and there was no other policeman who liked to look after the safety of all its inhabitants more than he did. Even the mayor, with whom Harry had a cordial, working, and friendly relationship, gave him the keys to the city a couple of years ago as a reward for catching a dangerous serial killer who had killed up to 4 teenage girls. On a personal note, Harry was well liked by everyone. He was cheerful and the typical person who always knew how to get a smile out of you, even in the most uncomfortable moments. He always knew how to see the bright side of things and cheer up others. It was precisely this virtue among many others that made his wife Margot, who also worked as a police officer in the Colorado Department, fall madly in love with him and accept his marriage proposal without hesitation. Unfortunately, their marriage did not last as long as they'd hoped. Margot died in the line of duty just 2 years after they were married. She and Harry were to be in charge of an undercover operation to uncover a dangerous drug ring. They'd done it before and had always been successful, but that night nothing went as planned. Margot was shot 3 times, the last one fatally, directly in her heart. From then on, not only did Margot's heart stop beating, Harry was never the same and never let anyone get close enough to know what was inside him. What Harry never stopped doing, however, was working and continuing to strive daily to catch the bad guys who were trying to fill his city with pain and darkness. It could be said after becoming a widower, Harry became the best version of himself as a cop. No one worked harder than he did, and he even worked overtime without anyone asking him to. His way of channeling his pain was through his dedication to the police force, something that everyone was eternally grateful for despite knowing the real reason he acted that way. "You're our best agent, Harry, and you know we all appreciate you here, but if you need to stop and take a break, don't hesitate to ask for it. We all deserve a break," his sergeant once told him. Harry had been working his tail off for months and looked exhausted. However, he again refused any kind of help. "Working is my rest, going home is my punishment. I thought you'd understand, John. You too became a widower and never got your life back together. You know as well as I do the pain that entails. I'm fine like this, let me help others. I'm more useful here than crying at a picture at home, believe me," Harry answered honestly. They both knew each other well. In fact, they studied together at the police academy and were good friends. They kept no secrets from each other. The sergeant accepted his rejection and never brought up the subject again. He just stayed by his side and was grateful for each of Harry's achievements in solving cases. And it was precisely his dedication and his great police acumen that led him to solve a complicated case that the police had been working on for months. A really disturbing case in which Harry demonstrated once again his worth as a policeman and his commitment to this city. The event we're going to tell you is about a horrifying story where 26 innocent children were victims of the greed of an unscrupulous woman whose only purpose was to get rich at all costs without caring about the consequences of her actions. Fortunately, Harry was there to stop her and put an end to the nightmare of all the families who fell into the trap of this vulgar criminal. It all started when a group of parents very concerned about the welfare of their children, all of them under 3 years old, filed multiple complaints about Play Mountain Place Daycare to DHS, warning that the treatment their children were receiving was not adequate. While inspectors handling the complaints initially found nothing to indicate that mistreatment was occurring, when parents persisted and filed a new wave of complaints a month after receiving a negative response, DHS decided to take it seriously and take the investigation to the next level. The parents' complaints about Play Mountain Palace prompted DHS to conduct an in-depth child welfare investigation on November 13th. And to make sure they didn't miss any details this time, they also asked police officers to accompany them to the site, with our protagonist Harry Evans being the inspector in charge of the case. However, to everyone's surprise, when investigators and police arrived at the daycare center, they found a surprising development. There were no children. The daycare center was completely empty and in quite bad shape, but contrary to what the parents had stated in their complaints, there was absolutely no one there. This put the police and DHS agents on alert, as it was not normal for a place where children are supposedly cared for to have no children and no adult in charge of the business to ask any questions. "This is really suspicious. Where is everybody? Who's the owner of this place? We must find her as soon as possible to find out what's going on here," exclaimed Harry as he realized the seriousness of the matter. "Right away, Inspector. We'll call the person in charge of this establishment right away and ask her the necessary questions," quickly answered one of the agents who accompanied them to carry out the inspection. They located the owner of the business by telephone and went to her house to question her. Her name was Carla Faith, 58 years old, and upon arrival, Harry and his colleagues questioned her about the whereabouts of the children. There was no time to lose, and it was clear this woman was hiding something. However, they found no answers when they went to see her and left with the same questions they arrived with. Faith refused to cooperate, but Harry, who had a terrible feeling as he looked into Faith's eyes, decided to disregard the words of the mysterious woman and went back to the nursery to take another look. It's impossible for the children to have just disappeared like that. If the parents left them there in the morning, they must still be there. We'll look again, and this time in depth. There must be some detail we're overlooking. Come on, guys, there's no time to waste. Harry ordered, rushing into the police car and leading his companions back to the nursery. When they returned to the nursery, everything remained the same. However, when everyone was silent and they were about to abandon the investigation because they couldn't find any useful evidence, Harry heard something that stopped his heart. It was the crying of children. They were crying inconsolably, and the sound was coming from somewhere inside. "They're here! The children are here! I heard them crying! There must be a hiding place behind a false wall or a basement with secret access. Let's find it now!" Harry shouted as he heard the children crying. His heart skipped a beat, and he and his companions began to search the entire room for them. After a thorough search of the premises, they discovered a false wall in one of the interior rooms right next to the management office. Breaking it down, they gained access to a staircase leading to the basement of the building, where they found a furnished room containing 26 children under the age of 3, as well as 2 of the children's caregivers. Both the children and the 2 female employees looked pitiful. When the police entered the dank, dingy basement, many of the children began to cry in fear, and the caregivers looked at them as if they had just seen an army of angels appearing. It was obvious that they were suffering and were very afraid of the lady who was forcing them to work in such subhuman conditions. Fortunately, Carla Faith would never mistreat anyone again. "Thank you, sir. I can't thank you enough for continuing to investigate until the end. Otherwise, that woman would have gotten away with it again. You don't know how evil she can be," confessed one of the employees to Evans before leaving with the paramedics to be treated in one of the ambulances that came to the scene after the police gave the warning. Thanks to the magnificent intervention of Harry, who decided not to give up and follow his instinct, and the health authorities who closed the center, these children would have justice and could once again lead a normal life and be cared for in a center suitable for them. Several of the parents affected by this terrible scam agreed to make a statement to KKTV and explain their experience so everyone would know the truth. "I was one of the first 2 parents to go to the site and would never have believed the state of affairs if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Before yesterday, I'd always dropped off and picked up my son in a clean, spotless, and loving environment. Yesterday, I picked up my son from a small, dirty room in a basement I'd never seen before, where 26 children were crammed together amid empty juice containers, graham cracker crumbs, and various children's blankets and stuffed animals. The room smelled like unchanged diapers, and several of the children were crying. The whole thing was the exact antithesis of everything I'd been led to believe my son was experiencing during the day spent at Play Mountain. My immediate hope was that this was a one-off, but in the corner of the basement there were cubbies with children's names on them on diapers, including my own son's, leading me to believe that this was a place where they'd spend time on a regular basis. This was nothing like the level of care I'd been led to believe my son was receiving, and the amount of deception that went on to convince parents otherwise is completely mind-boggling. To say that I'm shocked, overwhelmed, and feel totally betrayed is an understatement, as I had nothing but good reviews of this place and the caregivers before yesterday." The 2 daycare workers at the scene were arrested on misdemeanor charges of aiding and abetting child abuse, but those charges were later dropped after further investigation found that both were being extorted by Faith and acting against their will. For her part, Faith is detained pending trial without bail. She would spend a long time in a jail cell before being tried and would likely be sentenced to an exemplary prison term that would prevent her from ever making a child suffer again. As reported by the Los Angeles Times, it turned out that this was not the first time Faith had committed such a crime. In the 1990s, she owned Faith Family Daycare in Culver City, California, a daycare center that offered services identical to the Colorado Daycare Center. After receiving similar complaints, police investigated and discovered that she was enrolling more children than her licenses allowed. For this reason, Faith's California business was shut down, prompting her to move to Colorado to try again to run the scam undetected by law enforcement. And she almost succeeded, since applicants for daycare licenses in Colorado are not required to provide information about previous licenses in other states, so no one suspected her nefarious intentions, and she was allowed to open her daycare without any hassle. What the evil Faith did not count on was the presence of one of the best policemen in the country, and probably the best in the entire state of Colorado. The mere presence of Harry Evans made the fate of all those children and their caregivers change completely, freeing them from the mistreatment of a wicked criminal and imprisoning her forever to prevent her from harming anyone else. The news quickly spread, and Harry became a true idol of the masses. Through social media via the Colorado PD's Facebook profile, Evans received hundreds of messages of thanks, congratulating him on his bravery and talent as a police officer. Harry was grateful for all the love he received, but never let that fame go to his head. Today, he continues to work tirelessly and is happy to be able to continue to help make his country a safer place. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.